Often buying used cars represents a great deal. Why? Because previous owners often put on great accessories like this, or sometimes paint protection films and additional certified pre-owned warranty. But sometimes what appears to be a great deal is often a disaster waiting to happen. I'm going to share a list of the worst vehicles that you can buy on a used car market that you don't want to walk away from, you want to run away from. Life's too short to drive boring cars. So let's get to number 10, which is a brand like what we're looking at right here is a Volvo. Now this isn't the latest generation, but these vehicles here chalk up to 215 problems out of 100 customers. Why? Well, Consumers Reports ranks the Volvo XC40 as a relatively reliable, fun little SUV. As you move up the ranks in complexity, some of their higher end models has a whole host of other issues. Now unfortunately, Volvo, as attractive as they're getting, and certainly the style is coming up in the game. I love their vertical lights, but brake lights and electrics are some issues with the XC90 as we're looking here by Volvo. It has all the luxury amenities, from beautiful chrome trim to roof racks that are highly polished. The interior is chock full of entertainment, high quality materials, and a wonderful fit and finish. Isn't necessarily void from all problems, but the big issues come in the later generations, where all of a sudden Volvo stepped into the 4-cylinder, added a turbo, added a supercharger, and added electrification. They're creating a whole host of other technological challenges, as well as emergency braking systems, and some of the transmission problems that they've experienced means that the Volvos rank quite poorly. But as I say, 215 problems out of 100 vehicles means they round up the top 10 for some of the most unreliable and problematic potential vehicles on the used car market. And the next vehicles that are in line here is this little unit right here. What are we talking about? Yes, right there, Das Auto. This is one of their worst models, and as we look at other vehicles like the Taos has been one of their newer additions, small subcompact SUV, has had a lot of problems, electric problems, start-stop, the double clutch gearbox has been quite rough, and quite frankly, fuel leaks. I know somebody who personally ordered one, took possession, and then it spent the next months in the shop getting sorted out because of fuel leaks. Now, this here is probably one that makes a radar for one of the worst in this particular manufacturer, and we're looking at the Atlas here. Clearly has a host of issues that we can attest to. Some of them are electrics like we're seeing here, rear suspension collapsing. We also hear of noises where people are talking about whistling noises in this A-pillar, whistling into the cabin, making noises. People very disappointed with that. Also the forward collision avoidance system not functioning properly. And in the engine compartment, there's also been comments about systems that actually inadvertently stop the vehicle from driving, causing a very difficult iron grip to just keep this vehicle going steady state. Also, a lot of customers have talked about coolant loss, where it's sort of somehow getting gobbled up in the engine, likely consuming it on the inside. There's also been many complaints of fuel leaks under the hood as well, and as well the odd oil leak. Water leaks at the back, where people talk about water somehow migrating in there and soaking up the floors, and essentially water not sealing off from the elements. So Consumers Reports ranks this at 27 out of 30 of the worst, most unreliable car manufacturers, and JD Powers actually states that this vehicle has approximately 216 issues out of 100 vehicles. That's right, about 2.16 problems per vehicle that the average consumer would actually anticipate. Makes his vehicle relatively troublesome. And if you have one of the vehicles that doesn't leak or whistles down the road like Cinderella and the Dwarves, then you count yourself lucky. Own it through the warranty period, but we're talking about used vehicles. Again, a lot of these statistics are coming from 2020, where we're starting to see these vehicles pop out of warranty, and that's where they pose a huge risk. The next disaster in line, at 226 problems out of 100 vehicles, I will present to you the Chrysler brand. We know the vehicle like the 200 has had a lot of problems. It's a great looking little vehicle, but it falls apart, not well made. The 300s as well, not great, and everything from Dodge, Jeep, as well as Chrysler all fits within that space. The Stellantis group, not a great product. I mean, these vehicles aren't all that great looking, and they certainly aren't all that reliable. So to buy a used one might seem like a smart purchase, especially since you have the extra space to throw all the little kidlings back there, or you're being a soccer mom, it seems like an easy vehicle to justify. But honestly, Toyota Sienna is 10 times the vehicle this is, and this ranks so far down the chute in terms of overall durability, you would definitely have some problems along the way. Electrics, a lot of the lights may not work on the rear. The infotainment system, as well as the general radio, may function or may not function, and is a consistent issue. Clearly, we know that there's a lot of issues with transmissions, whether they slip, they jerk, hard abrasive shifting, or just outright catastrophic failure. There's been lots of reports of all of the above. Did you know also NHTSA reports over 500 complaints thus far for this latest generation of the Chrysler Pacifica? You also can't forget there are coolant leaks, engine failures, stalls, so every which way, electrics, motor, transmission, it's a triple threat. And when you have any one of those big issues that are more of a chronic problem, that's going to cost you big time. Unfortunately, this vehicle has all of the above. Next on the list of vehicles that are very difficult to own outside of warranty and certainly in the used car market. So here we have a couple of Jaguars. Here obviously the F-Pace and we have the F-Type. Now I personally bought one of these F-Types just because they're so spectacular and they're so amazing to drive that it's hard to deny these vehicles. But even when I did that, I had to buy a certified pre-owned warranty, added a little extra warranty and coverage and protection to it just to protect my assets, and that just kept me in a good spot. But both of these vehicles are potential risks. Consumers Reports ranks Jaguar all the way down close to the bottom of the list in terms of overall reliability. 229 problems per 100 vehicles. It's certainly on the hit list of the top 10 vehicles that definitely are to avoid as a used car vehicle. Again, unless you have a certified pre-owned warranty, just make sure you know what you're dealing with. In the F-Pace, you can get a Turbo 4 Ingenium engine. There have been some problems with those. Coolant leaks or consumption of coolant, as well as there's been e-brake, emergency braking system on these vehicles that have been problematic, electronic problems, specifically when we talk about the infotainment system and firmware updates related to that. That has always been a problem. And even on my F-Type, I had a problem. They had to replace some hardware in there that took weeks to get. And unfortunately, my car was out of commission just because waiting for parts. And then even after I had it for a couple more weeks, the problem kind of persisted. So it's clearly an issue with a lot of these vehicles. You get a supercharged V6 as well in certain generations, as well as supercharged V8 and the SVR, but there have been some problem areas. Even with the F-Type, as great as a car this is, high pressure fuel pump. Of course, it's direct injected, so the fuel injectors as well have been problematic, leaking down and causing huge dollars. There's a coolant Y pipe in the front. They burst because they're fragile, and then they eventually start puking coolant all over the place. Timing chains have been some problems. The rear emergency brake have been problems, as well as frosting up on some of these door handles, because when you get this frosty cold weather like this, it clogs up those handles, and those handles are retractable. Of course, they do flush in and out, and that's where they start to bog down. So there have been a host of different electric type related issues. Mechanically, the ZF 8-speed automatic transmission's been pretty bulletproof, but generally there have been some issues. They're certainly not without their troubles. And honestly, it's not that they're that grossly unreliable. It's just that when you take the vehicle to the shop, you're going to anticipate $200 a shop rate per hour, as well as very highly priced parts to replace when something goes actually wrong with these vehicles. So fun to own, but they are a risk on the used car market. The next used car brand that you probably shouldn't buy is Mercedes. It doesn't rank very well. As a matter of fact, the 2020, and we're talking about 2020 because those are typically vehicles just rolling outside of warranty. We're talking about the C-Class ranks particularly poorly, with Consumers Reports ranking at 37 out of 100, and 240 problems per 100 vehicles is what you're going to anticipate. We actually bought a 2018, which is the same generation, same engine, same transmission as this vehicle, and I can truly attest we had some problems. I mean, let's face it, Mercedes-Benz, they always look great, and they are the epitome of luxury. I mean, just take a good look around here. It's much nicer to look at than obviously its competitors in BMW, Audi, and even Lexus, for example. The interior looks very, very nice, but it doesn't hold up all that well. As Consumers Reports said, there's a couple of key areas to be concerned with. Number one are the brakes. Yes, and we found our brakes constantly squealing and howling and making strange noises, and coincidentally, Consumers Reports says the same thing. As a matter of fact, last time I took mine in to address noisy brakes, there was another customer rolling in with a service writer in the passenger seat, and I could hear this thing squealing and howling from outside as they were driving by. So they make a lot of noises. The brakes aren't that great. Our car as well started to develop a strange noise up in the front here. Hard to make out if it's wheels, drag, if it's tires. They say they're not even sure. The dealers looked at it twice now. They can't figure it out. I truly believe it's a gearbox issue or a transfer case problem. And even the forums advocate for the fact that it could be a bearing within the transmission, and the vendor isn't even still owning up to it. Not to mention you're paying a lot of money, shop rates significantly higher than most manufacturers. And the fact is these cars go for no apparently reason even into the shop, just because they seem to have these nickel and dime problems. We also had an issue in our car where we were driving down a roadway and we hit a set of train tracks, and it was a little bit rough, and ours is a coupe, so body panel literally popped off here, left a gap there. We had to take it into the dealer to get it fixed, but also inside, that speaker over on the door, way over behind the steering wheel, popped right out of the door panel and flopped into the door cavity. So just by hitting a piece of rough train tracks, half the car seemed like it fell apart. And all of a sudden there was a couple screws loose underneath the hood. I don't know where they belonged. It just felt like the car just is not built all that well. Another concern that I've heard about in the forum, because when you buy a car, you start searching the forums and understanding what people are dealing with. And we've found out that some people are dealing with pistons that are blowing holes in them because of detonation. Now, whether it's a fueling or an EGR issue, whatever the problem is, there is some issue with sometimes some of these engines blowing up. And there have been significant amount of cases actually reporting that. So be careful with that. Definitely, if you need to have this, I understand, certified pre-owned warranty all the way. And the GLE is as well a high-risk vehicle. It's one of the most unreliable Mercedes-Benz SUVs on the market too, and ranks very, very poorly. S-Class is going to be big bucks, and every one of their vehicles and models is going to be a costly venture to own. And right there's the next vehicle with one of the highest risk used car propositions right in front of us here. We're talking about Tesla. This specifically, the Model X, is probably the one that ranks the worst in terms of overall quality, reliability, and the level of problems that customers are having. The Model S is the other premier sedan as we're looking at right there, and Tesla has other models. For example, right there in white, we have the little Model Y, which is a very popular smaller SUV, but at 242 problems per 100 vehicles, they're going to anticipate some problems. A lot of them are softer. Obviously, there's very little mechanical movement in these vehicles, so it's a whole host of new troubles. Not only that, have you heard that used vehicles aren't selling well on the used car market? Internal combustion engines do better as vehicles age. As they hit 5, 6, 7 years of age, you're going to have an easier time buying and selling a used ICE vehicle, but the electric vehicle market is a tricky one. The first year or two, they do okay on the resale. But after that, they don't sell well. Why? Because every year that goes by is a ticking time bomb. Some of these batteries, whether it's Hyundai and Kia, are rated for 8 years or 100,000 miles, and Tesla has a slightly better warranty, but at the end of the day, every year that goes by, there's no getting that back, and those batteries have a limited lifespan. So getting an older one does represent huge potential issues. Obviously, we're looking at the Falcon doors. That's been a problem for a lot of these vehicles right here, the Falcons, as we see a lot of people are having issues with that flapping up. Suspension issues, quality control with paint, fit and finish. We have panel gaps that don't necessarily line up, the wheels, and just the general quality, fit and finish internally as well. Body panels inside don't line up like they should. Remote software updates have created some problems along the way as well. And did you hear recently Tesla just finally announced that they're recalling virtually every one of their worldwide vehicles just because of the autonomous driving feature that they don't want people to use because it's not truly as safe as a lot of people think, and it poses a huge risk to not just the driver, passengers, as well as other people on the same roadway. Now, there aren't as many on the road, 8 to 10% of these on the roadway, so it's hard to track exactly what the levels of problems are, but clearly we're seeing a significant number already, and it does pose a real challenge on the used car market. Brands like Ford always make the radar for vehicles that are a risk buying them used, with dropping valves, ejecting spark plugs on some of the V8 engines, power shift transmissions in the earlier generation Ford Fiestas and some of their smaller four-banger engines are using that rough transmission that just doesn't work. Electrical issues are another problem. Some of the EcoBoost engines that you're finding in some of the Ford Escapes that you're getting with consuming of coolant and actually blown head gaskets and engine failures. Did you hear about the latest big recall? The 113,000 F-150s afflicted with the breaking rear hub axle components here that could allow that vehicle to just inadvertently roll away, causing obvious detriment if that rolls into a building or rolls into another vehicle. That can be a troubled area. We can't forget about fuel injector issues, of course, carbon buildup, and some of the problems issues there, EGR valves causing rough idle, and a whole host of other troubles. Now, we do know the F-150 is one of the best-selling pickup trucks in North America. People trust them, but they're also largely selling because they go to a lot of cities. counties that use them for some of their work trucks, municipalities. Ford could experience up to 249 failures per 100 vehicles, 2.5 failures per owner for one of their new Fords. That's not a great ratio. When you compare that to maybe one on a Toyota or a Honda, that definitely gets you coming back to the dealer again and again and again. And that doesn't even speak for the problem areas that some people just get used to dealing with. Unfortunately, Ford has some real hit and misses. Their pickup trucks and larger SUVs are probably a little less risk, but nonetheless, Ford has had a significant amount of problems, especially with their smaller EcoBoost engines, V6s, as well as some of these mass variety of different recalls. And next on our list for vehicles that are highly risky on the used car segment is what we're looking at here, Audi. And at 49 out of 100 for overall reliability, it ranks very poorly, and customer satisfaction is very, very low as well. You can almost expect 252 problems per 100 vehicles for your average consumer of an Audi. And we're talking about specifically Q3. This here's a Q5 parked in front of me here. Q3s are even more problematic, but almost every Audi, as you step up the ranks, have more and more increased levels of failures just because of the complexity levels. But what sort of problems can you anticipate with some of the Audis that are typical? Well, a lot of people talk about water leaks. Leaks either through the windows here, you can get leaks here, leaks here. People talk about leaks coming in through the sunroof, dripping down into the cabin space, causing electric failures. There has definitely been some issues with shorting of modules because water getting in from the sunroof. There's also potential water ingress from the rear trunk lid. We talk about braking issues, rough, bumpy rides a lot of customers are complaining about. A whole plethora of electronic issues where technology doesn't always work as it should, or you would actually expect it to as a customer. And if you had one of the older generations, the E8, 888, 2-liter turbo engine, timing chains, huge settlement allegedly for timing chain failures where they just go boom and then the engine's gone. And then basically that's a significant failure that a lot of troubled owners have experienced. Transmission issues, failures, surging, hunting, and not really all that reliable in some cases. There's also problems with the collision avoidance system, which has been known to fail, as well as the stop-start, where the vehicle stops at a red light and you go to accelerate and then it just lurches, it waits. There's been a lot of people complaining that that's a real risk. You're sitting at a light and you got to get going and the vehicle doesn't because you lift your foot off the brake. It signals the person behind you, but you're not actually moving, and it does potentially cause a risk of accident. We know that Volkswagen, Audi, and any associated companies have always had some reliability concerns. And right there is the next fluffer on the list that you probably want to try to avoid. For the most part, Lincoln, like we're looking at right here with the plus sign, that's the target to tell you where the center of the beast is, where the problem areas is, right there, right up the center. Now, Lincoln MKZ, for example, are reasonable. They come on the Ford Fusion platform, essentially. They're reasonably durable, but 259 problems out of 100 vehicles is what Lincoln generally averages. We're talking about the Navigator, which is their biggest tank. It's basically a brick on wheels, is not only not attractive, but there's just too many issues with it. And while the turbocharged V6 engine makes over 400 ponies, it's definitely a spry little ride, but the problem is this Lincoln isn't necessarily the most durable, and realistically, the large vehicles and the SUVs that you're getting from this brand generally aren't all that well put together, and you would anticipate some significant problems as listed by that number, 259 problems out of 100. And the worst vehicle to buy used is by this manufacturer. And this one, as well as this one. At about 273 problems out of 100 vehicles, guaranteed you're going to have your share of troubles. Now, it also ranks at 17 out of 17 for luxury vehicles in terms of the bottom of the barrel reliability, and as well as overall manufacturers, it ranks 32 out of 32. Lots of electric issues. We talk about some of the problems with the infotainment system, power windows, power locks, fitment issues. Look, it's bigger there than it is down here. Brake problems, transmission issues that can be lurchy and aggressive. Of course, in some cases, these lock up, they seize up because of the snow and ice that's clogged up in there. Tailgate troubles, fitment problems where some of the fittings and panels do pop off inadvertently. And Range Rover even went as far as got rid of their 5-liter V8 engine that was supercharged, and they gave it up for a 4.4-liter BMW-derived V8 engine under the hood, just to try to shake things up a little bit in the name of reliability. So while Land Rover is owned by Tata Motors, essentially part of the JLR group, reliability isn't necessarily top shelf for them. And while they truly are fit for a king, unless you have the king's ransom and his bankroll, you're definitely not going to be able to afford to maintain and keep one of these Land Rovers outside of warranty. So with 273 problems out of 100 vehicles, with $200 an hour shop rate and more, parts priced almost in line with exotic cars, and a limited dealer network, just means owning one of these vehicles means while they're amazing to own and drive inside a warranty, owning one outside of warranty used after 2020 makes us all have to question our sanity. And with all of that said, be sure to check out that great video. It's all about the biggest losers. People overpaid for those specific vehicles. Hope to see each and every one on the next one. We'll see you all real soon. See you later. Bye-bye.